So what I'm hearing is that people are going to fight or flight. If it's unresolved or they just don't, whatever, for whatever reason, if it gets to overwhelm, they end up in freeze, which is more like depression-y, kind of numb disassociation. And as they come out of depression, they can go through what's called the flood, which
Yeah.
is where you're referring to overwhelm.
Yeah.
But that's on their nervous system is re-regulating, but they're reconnecting with feelings again. And then if they don't freak out or run away from the therapist saying it's got worse or whatever, and they recognize what's going on, they can move through that and get back to a balanced, regulated, healthy, functioning autonomic nervous system. Hello and welcome to the Mind Detox podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Newbigging. For today's episode, I talked to Dr Melanie Salmon, who's the creator of Quantum Energy Coaching, or Q.E.C. I asked Dr Melanie about using her technique to support the healing of common problems that millions of us are dealing with, including medical conditions and emotional issues like anxiety, depression, and grief. Stay tuned, because I also asked Dr. Melanie about her views on spirituality and also how we can use her technique to attract more of what we want into our life. This is one of my most favorite interviews ever, so stay tuned to learn all about mind-body healing and manifestation. And if you want to experience Q.E.C for yourself, then check out my website, minddetox.com, to book some one-on-one sessions with me. So hello and welcome to this chit-chat interview with the amazing, wonderful, life-changing Dr. Melanie Salmon. Hello, Dr. Melanie.
Hello. Don't embarrass me now.
One of the things I love about you is your modesty. You've really changed my life and many others with your Q.E.C technique. This is our second interview. We did one last year, maybe a year before. I can't remember already. But because you kind of gave more of your background of yourself last time, I'm wondering, just because we're going to be referring to Q.E.C tonight, can you start with a brief intro as to what Q.E.C is? So when we refer to it, people have an idea of what it actually is.
Gosh, okay. It's not easy to say in one sentence. So it stands for Quantum Energy Coaching. And the reason a lot of people ask me, why did I name it that? Well, I think the main thing is that what I'm really working with, what I understand is that our body is a quantum field. We're actually quantum holograms at the microscopic level. We're not the solid body that we think we are. And unfortunately, modern medicine, which I was in, it doesn't really understand that yet. They're a little bit behind in understanding quantum physics, sadly. So quantum energy coaching is a way of having dialogue or coaching with somebody, but at the same time recognizing that if any change is needed to happen, it's got to happen at the quantum field. And the only access to that quantum field is through the bigger computer of the subconscious mind. Our conscious mind, our talking minds, just aren't big enough to evoke change. So I found a way to work with the subconscious mind, the big computer. And and that's how we can bring about change that is much bigger, more profound, quicker, and safer at the same time.
So although I'm an advocate for different tools for different times, and they all serve a purpose, this is one of the reasons why some people get really frustrated with the classical talk therapy, right? Because they're talking about stuff, but they don't necessarily feel that it's moving them forward as fast as they might wish. Is that? Can you expand upon that a little bit so people understand the difference a bit more?
Yeah, you see, I was a GP, but I was also trained in Gestalt psychotherapy. So I became a psychotherapist, and I did that alongside general practice for a good 25 years. And I was very frustrated that people weren't shifting things that were important to them with the talk therapy alone. And I was good, I knew what I was doing, and they used to tell me I was a good therapist. And I couldn't understand why people weren't getting better. And they were still with me, after 5 years of weekly therapy. And it was only really when I learned about the subconscious mind having the power for change that I realized that talk therapy doesn't have that power. So what talk therapy does do, I mean, it is still very valuable, but it has a different method. The idea of talk therapy, certainly in Gestalt for me, was to raise awareness. So through the relationship of trust and through discussing about what's going on in your life, I'm able to shine the light of awareness on your issues. And the belief is, it certainly was by Fritz Perls who developed Gestalt, the belief is that awareness is key to everything. So once you become aware of your problem, you'll get better all by yourself. Now that does happen for the ordinary everyday stuff, but man, it doesn't happen for trauma. You can forget it. You can't get better knowing I was an expert in my own trauma when I went to Gestalt therapy myself. I knew all about it. I was walking around in it. I was crying in it. I was beating cushions in my Gestalt thing, but I never got better. And that's the difference, you see. I realized that I had to find a way of working that could help things that were hardwired. And trauma is one of them, addictions are another. So that's the difference essentially.
And I know you taught me some elements of Gestalt therapy, and it's such a difference. I remember we were like into maybe one-on-one sessions, maybe session 4 or 5, and it wasn't until then that through the Gestalt therapy I could see that I was still presenting to you a facade of the version of me I wanted you to see, and it was so obvious that how could you help me if I wasn't actually showing you me? And what is it about Gestalt that can help someone to actually get through that barrier so you're actually talking about the real issues? Like, what do you think makes that technique able to do that?
Well, I think what is so beautiful about Gestalt, which is why I was attracted to train in it, is this idea of they use a method called phenomenology, which is about, it's a way of being present with somebody where you are so fully present that you tune into them. And it's a sensitivity to the other human being coupled with immense respect. So there's no pushing, there's no trying to manipulate your client to go somewhere that you think they should go. It's a deeply, almost sacred way of being with another human being. And that's what helps people to want to open up, to want to go further, to want to take the mask off and say, hey, I trust you. I can see you respect me. I can see you here only for my highest good. So I'm going to show you the pain on the inside. So I think it's that whole phenomenological approach, which it was very unique in many ways to Gestalt, that attracted me to it. It was the sacred present moment, present-centered, being in tune with the client that I found a lovely way to be. And that's why I used it for my Q.E.C. It's the foundation of Q.E.C. This is what I teach my students, to be that way, essentially, when they're trying to find out what a person's problem is.
And that's almost like, it almost seems like a little bit counterintuitive, because what I'm hearing is when you first start the conversation, you're not trying to fix the person at that moment in time.
Yes.
And what difference does that make, do you feel?
To me or to the client?
To the dialogue, to the dialogue, to the client. Like, it seems almost counterintuitive to have that period of dialogue where actually the therapist isn't actually trying to fix, change, heal, or whatever the person. What are they doing instead at that moment in time?
Well, the idea that you're not there to fix somebody else is the very core of Gestalt, and it's the core of Q.E.C. In fact, I see Q.E.C as self-help. I give the client the opportunity for the magic wand or the miracle. It's nothing to do with me. So not fixing somebody is essential. I believe, to successful psychotherapy or any form of successful Q.E.C. The minute that you want to fix somebody, then you're in a different role. Then you're in a role like a doctor or a nurse or a coach who has a certain agenda with an end goal to meet. It's a very, very different experience. That's not healing. That's not generating healing within the person. A human being, when they're fully listened to and not being pushed to get somewhere or to, get fixed, changes their entire structure of who they are. They start to become empowered. They start to let go of defense, and they start to become engaged and curious and interested in change. It's a completely different way of working. And in fact, I had a really awful childhood because of all my trauma, but I'd learned Gestalt by the time I had my own children. And so what I did was I employed that principle of being present without trying to fix my own kids when they were like 5, 6, 7, 8. I would just sort of be curious and say, oh, what do you want to do next? And wow, I can see you're excited now. And thank goodness I had that, because if I, repeated what was done to me, that probably would be a mess by now. So I found that even in child upbringing and in parenting, that using that, I'm not here to fix you, I'm here to respect you and help you grow at your own pace. It's fabulous, yeah.
And linked, but moving on a little bit, I meet a lot of people that when they hear the word trauma, it's a very daunting word, and they can be quite scared about the kind of worms they might open up. What would your words of wisdom be to that person that might be wanting to do this, but they're scared of opening that kind of worms up, especially when they hear the word trauma?
Yeah, it's funny that this has come up quite a lot recently with me, with clients who said that they're scared of trauma, they're scared of opening the can of worms, as you put it. And I'm not sure what the fear is, because the reality is that every single one of us on the planet has suffered trauma. So it's a universal human condition. And in recent years, it's been very obvious, it's been very out there that we're all suffering. People have lost jobs, they've lost family members who have died. I mean, there's just no end of trauma. So why is there this fear around trauma? I think that people think that if you're going to be talking to somebody about it, that you're going to have to walk around in the pain, you're going to have to cry and have an unpleasant experience. Whereas in fact, having a conversation about your trauma with me, it isn't that way at all. It's not the way I function. Psychotherapy certainly does require you to go back and feel what you felt, because that's the awareness process is created that way. So you would go back and you would be encouraged to feel it all again in its fullness. But in Q.E.C, we don't do that at all. We just get the story and we move very quickly into finding the way to heal from it, which is in an energy frequency of gratitude. So by the end of the session, people are feeling lighter and grateful. And they go, wow, I went through a whole trauma thing with you and I'm feeling so light. I feel like a burden has been lifted. So this fear is unrealistic. I think people are just naturally afraid of something that they don't really want to look at.
I think that's an amazing response, because I think in my 2 pence would be, one of the big things people are scared of with opening the can of worms is the emotions and feelings that are in that can. And what would you say to the person that says, well, you're bypassing to not feel and just go straight to the story? I just want to cover that just in case that doubt's there for someone. There's a famous phrase, to heal, you got to feel, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I'm just curious about what we might say to that person who's listening.
Well, I'm not saying that you don't feel, and people do feel when they're in session with me. They may be triggered to feeling the sadness or the grief or the fear, whatever it is. But what I'm saying is that the therapeutic process in Q.E.C doesn't require that we stay and prolong that experience. Okay, we move through it fairly quickly.
Yep.
And it gets acknowledged, it gets recognized, but it's not necessary for your healing to walk around in that dark valley. It's not necessary. It doesn't create the healing. The healing is not coming from walking around in the valley of death in the way that it is in psychotherapy.
Before I get into the questions I plan to ask you, sometimes I have people that, everything in this world is so instant gratification, instant, everything's instant. And I think healing is kind of, it's falling into that category a little bit, and people are looking for this quick fix. That's not been my experience. I've experienced progress and quick progress, but when it comes to the fix idea, how do you deal with someone that's really focused on getting their health condition fixed, like ASAP or whatever? Like, do you think that it can be quick, but they need to also be willing for it to sometimes be a longer term thing? Or what would you say the right attitude is for someone to enter a therapy relationship when it comes to speed?
Well, I don't think that therapeutic healing is a quick fix. It's certainly what I do, Q.E.C, when we're working with the subconscious mind. It is quicker. Mm-hmm. I would be working 5 years with a client in Gestalt, and now it would be 5 months, or sometimes in the younger people between the 20s and 30s, heal even more quickly. And for them, it may just be 5 weeks. So it's anything from 5 weeks to a year would be the span of what I do. So if anybody comes to me and says that they want, a magic wand or a miracle to be fixed overnight, I would tell them that they're being unrealistic and explain why. I would give them the time frame that this does take, and I would say that the efforts and dedication put into spending that time is well worth it. So I would try and talk them out of it, but always explain. One of the things that is the most key part of my work is healing the autonomic nervous system, which is that part of us that gets automatically switched on to fight and flight. And a lot of people who are in this sort of fight and flight mode are rushing around, holding all these balls in the air, and they're the ones who want to let that go quickly. And I explained to them that it takes at least 4 sessions of instruction to that autonomic nervous system for it to begin to settle down. And then we still need to do the work of whatever it was that put it there in the first place. We need to go to that causative story, or the trauma, whatever it might be. And, it's relatively quick. And what I tell them is that you will feel better from, rushing around, and the anxiety will go. For some people, in fact, I was just looking at a recording this afternoon of somebody who's allowing me to use them for my new intergenerational trauma work. And she said that she'd had panic attacks and severe anxiety for 10 months. When she saw me and we put in the statement to the nervous system to begin relaxing it, the anxiety was gone the next day. And she was so stunned by this that she eventually came on the training and so on. So, and now we're doing her intergenerational trauma, because that's where it actually came from in the first place. So I'm getting fascinated. I'm going off the topic here. But some of our problems come from previous generations as well.
Exactly. So they might have had them for generations. We want to try and get it done in 3 sessions or whatever. So I think you answered the question perfectly, because it's just, although I don't want to make my life all about therapy, I also don't see, I experience it as more of a journey, an ever increasing, revealing, more discovery, and these layers of the onion, so to speak. And so I think it helps. I mean, I don't like the pressure as a therapist if we have to do it really quickly, but I also feel it almost puts the person into a state of fight, flight, freeze, or whatever, because they're trying to do it so quickly and they're not letting the things relax and actually just have the natural dialogue they need. So anyway, I just wanted to put out there, it was I was asked about it this week, so I wanted to ask you. All right, getting into the questions I had for you. Millions of people are dealing with medical conditions, and I've been working with the Mind Body Connection for years, and I recently did a course with you on medical conditions. So I think some people might be listening today curious about how to use Q.E.C on medical conditions. And I'd like in your answer to maybe make reference to oxidative stress, because that was a big thing that I don't think enough people know about that I picked up from your course. So I guess my question is, can you share how Q.E.C can help with medical conditions? I know you did a several week course on that, so I know it's hard to share in a few seconds. And also, can you make mention to oxidative stress in your response, please? Because I really want to put that out there.
All right. So, wow, as you say, there was a 5-week course to answer in less than 5 minutes. Basically, once again, remember I said that we are quantum holographic beings carrying this energy field. And we started off on the spiritual level, and then we became mental and psycho-emotional. And when we start having problems, they generally start off at the spiritual level, then they drop down to the mental, then the psycho-emotional. And if we aren't able to deal with them at that level, they then express themselves as a physical problem, which then become the medical diagnosis. And then we pop off to the doctor and we get given pharmaceuticals, and we get even more sick because we are now taking pharmaceutical agents. So it's a real mess. And in actual fact, what oxidative stress is the warning signal to the body long before a problem becomes expressed as a medical problem. The heart attack, the blood pressure, the diabetes. Long before that happens, the body is already giving us signals that it's in stress. It's in stress because of something that's going on in our lives that's not, when we're not happy with. And that's a range of stuff. So what is oxidative stress? It's when the autonomic nervous system is switched on. Basically, everything comes back to the core of the body. The autonomic nervous system is like the trunk of a tree. And all the other systems in the body, from the immune system to the endocrine system and everything else, are all the branches that come out of this tree trunk. And the tree trunk has to be rooted. It has to be strong and grounded and centered. And that's what our nervous system is supposed to be like. Now, if we become stressed and it's not like that anymore, all the other systems go out of whack. And then we develop what's called oxidative stress. And if we don't pay attention to our stress, not long after that, we're going to start getting the first thing. And what will it be? It'll be the cough or cold, the sneezing, the so-called COVID, as people, everybody's going down with COVID now. I'm not surprised. It's just stress. It's oxidative stress. And once again, if we don't pay attention to it at that level, and we leave it or we treat it with pharmaceuticals, the next thing we have then is our diabetes or our heart attack or our blood pressure, because the body is getting more and more stressed and more debilitated. What we need to be paying attention to is the trunk of the tree is no longer standing firm anymore. So all its branches are in danger, and they're beginning to wilt. Do you see? Mm-hmm. So it's the nervous system that needs attention. And sadly, there's very few people that are giving nervous system attentions anywhere. It's not happening in mainstream anywhere.
Yeah, it's it's why I was so excited to learn this with you and to get into it. It just seems like when you get that sorted, so many other byproducts happen just all by themselves.
Yes, and it's quite easy to get sorted. It's not like it's a big problem, and you don't have to go off and buy anything or go through any expensive treatment. You just have to know what to do to get the nervous system back on track again, and then everything just settles. The medical problems go away. Even the addictions go away once you get the nervous system back on track.
But isn't that just so amazing? I mean, if you are you hearing what's being shared right now? If you are overwhelmed by what's the underlying thing for this, that, or the next thing, or you're trying to kind of figure out focus on getting your autonomic nervous system back to balance. Let that be your first step, and then see what reveals from there. But it's a wonderful observation, let's say. I'm not going to call it advice or anything because it's a wonderful observation of you. Thank you so much. All right. I want to move on to your views on anxiety. Again, one of the big things people are dealing with is anxiety. And when someone's experienced it, it can be feeling very overwhelming and uncontrollable, and very quite scary actually. And we almost end up being scared of the fear itself. And it's this 360 loop that just goes round and round. How can Q.E.C help with anxiety?
Well, you see, anxiety is the autonomic nervous system speaking to you loud and clear. It's the first signal that the nervous system has gone into fight and flight. That's what anxiety is. And when you don't deal with it, if you don't get relief from it when it gets switched on into fight and flight. What is fight and flight? Fight is, fighting your enemy, and flight is running away when the tiger is after you in the jungle. We're programmed to have the switch on when we're threatened. And all anxiety is the nervous system switched on saying, we are being threatened. We need to pay attention to that. We need to stop the threat. Okay, but the problem is we don't recognize our threat because we're in a modern world. We're not in the jungle. We don't really recognize what we've been threatened by. So much of it is unconscious stuff. And if we don't switch off our anxiety at that point, it goes to a higher level, which is then the panic. And that's when we get overwhelmed. It starts becoming panic attacks. So once again, there's only one treatment. You've got to switch the autonomic nervous system off. You've got to have the tools that do it. TRE, trauma release exercise, does it. It's very good at switching the autonomic nervous system off, but that's unfortunately all it does. It doesn't treat the cause. It only treats the symptom. What Q.E.C does is it treats the cause and the symptom, and fairly swiftly. Like this woman I told you today, by the next day, her anxiety was down 70-80%, and it was gone in 3 sessions.
It can happen.
Yes.
It can happen.
Yes.
Staying with the emotions, what would you say depression is when it comes to like the response? There's other responses, like, would that be more freeze, or is it something different to that? Where does depression sit within all of this?
Depression is when anxiety is not dealt with, and when other emotions that might be going up in the fight and flight, the fear goes up in fight and flight, but so do things like anger and so on. When all of these emotions are around too much and a person becomes overwhelmed, they then go even higher in the bell curve of the autonomic stimulation to the zone of freeze. It's the place of disconnection where your emotions numb out, because the human body can only take so much overwhelm, and then it has to numb out for safety. And that's where depression is. Depression is somebody who is now numbed out and disconnected to some degree from life. And the experience of that is called depression. There isn't a disease called depression. They've got it all wrong, and then they put you on antidepressants. And the sad thing about antidepressants is they keep you numbed out. Their focus is to make you numb out even more so that you don't have the overwhelm experience anymore. So you get stuck in freeze on antidepressants. I shouldn't give bad news here, should I? And the other bad news about antidepressants are they're addictive. So they're jolly difficult to come off. So anyway, yeah, that's depression.
I appreciate everyone's unique, but how would you bring back someone from depression?
Well, I would, if somebody came to me saying they were suffering from depression and they were willing to have Q.E.C with me, I always teach whenever I'm with people, because I think that there's so little information and understanding. And I would explain where they were. I would look at what the causative factors of their depression were. I always ask, how long have you been depressed? And if they say for 6 years, I always say, what was going on in your life around 6 years ago? And invariably it's, well, I lost my wife, she died of cancer, something like that, right? And then I go, okay, so we've got a cause for why your system went completely out of whack and you became eventually numbed out. So you can come out of depression. We just simply give instructions to the nervous system to start coming back down to connection again, to what I call a place of baseline, where you are in touch with your emotions again. On the way down, it's a bit rocky though, It's a little bit rocky because you'll feel for a week or so, you could feel a bit overwhelmed as you get in touch with those feelings again. This is the way I teach.
Mhm.
So I warn them of what the path would be, but I also tell them it's only going to take 2 or 3 weeks to pass through that phase of feeling strong emotions, but I'm with you all the way. And you can come and see me more often. You can write to me. We can put in sentences to support you and so on. And most people opt to then take that journey and come out of depression, recover, stop taking the antidepressants. A lot of people will opt for that. But I don't expect anybody to go on a journey without knowing what the journey involves, how long it's going to be and what you're going to feel. And I'm very, very honest with people. And sometimes people don't want to do it. They go, no, it sounds too difficult. Not going to go there.
So what I'm hearing is that people are going to fight or flight. If it's unresolved or they just don't, for whatever reason, if it gets to overwhelm, they end up in freeze. And then as they come out of, which is more like depression-y, kind of numb disassociation, and as they come out of depression, they can go through what's called the flood, which is where you're referring to overwhelm. But that's on their nervous system is re-regulating, but they're reconnecting with feelings again. And then if they don't freak out or run away from the therapist saying it's got worse or whatever, and they recognize what's going on, they can move through that and get back to a balanced, regulated, healthy, functioning autonomic nervous system.
Yes. And they're actually quite surprised at how quick it is. It's not like you have to go through that flood zone for weeks and weeks on ends. Not at all. It's just a few days usually. I
found with my clients with Q.E.C, like sometimes they need a few rebuild soothing statements around about that time to really help them deal with, because sometimes we didn't get the resources growing up as to how to deal with our emotions and what to do when we're flooding. And so some support at that point is crucial. But sometimes people run away and I'm like, no, it's working. This is the very time. You know, how many times I hear from someone saying, I want to do therapy with you, but I'm going to wait until I'm feeling a bit better. I'm like, no, this is the time to do the therapy. Why are you waiting until things are better in your life until you start the therapy? So I'm putting out there, if you're one of them, stop waiting, because the suffering can be over much quicker if you take action now. Okay, talking of a really tricky emotion, and you know, there's a lot of people dealing with grief right now for a multitude of reasons. I'm seeing reports come out from multiple countries that death rates have increased quite dramatically and over the last year or so. I'm not going to talk about potential reasons why today, but there is an increase statistically right now. And so more and more people are going to be dealing with grief. And so I'd love for you to share your take on grief and how you would support someone through bereavement.
Well, I personally believe that grieving is an important process. And I would do everything I can to teach my clients about what it is, what it involves, and encourage them to engage with the process rather than numb out from it and push it away. I think that in our sort of modern world, we expect people to be over and done with their grief within 2 or 3 weeks. I remember after my baby died, I went back to work as a GP, and I couldn't handle it because I was working on a children's ward. It was part of my sabbatical, was actually in a pediatric unit. And I went back to see my own GP, and I said, I need longer to grieve. And he said, you've had 3 weeks, it's enough, come on. And at that point, I just shut down because I, just couldn't handle it. So I think the expectation is it should be over and done with quickly. Well, that's not grieving. The process of grieving can take months, and depending on how long the relationship is, if it's a marriage of 25 years, you're going to spend 2 years grieving. That's just how it is. So grieving is a process, and what I explain to people is that, first of all, it's necessary to open to it because it helps you to grow and helps you to eventually bring that beloved one that you've lost into your heart, rather than having them separated out from you by this big wall of unprocessed grief, which is what will happen if you don't process it. So what is processing it? It's me spending time with a woman, with a person in their grieving process, using Q.E.C to install supportive statements, to allow it, to feel it fully, to embody it, embrace it, that sort of thing. And also explain to them that it will never overwhelm. It's like a sort of, I was going to say roller coaster. In the beginning, it feels like a roller coaster. You get moments of grief, and then you get moments where you feel absolutely fine. And the grief moments get wider and wider spaced. So although you might still have those moments 2 years later where you will remember your husband that died, it's only a moment out of a month. So they get wider apart. So again, I teach all of that it's a manageable process. We're human beings. We're meant to experience grief because it's part of our condition. And if we can allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to do that, we actually grow and we become deeper, better human beings because of it.
Wow, beautiful. I remember I was reminded of a conversation I had with someone once, and I'm not proud of this. I was in a spiritual community that was teaching the opposite of what you're sharing right now. And Christina actually sat down in front of me one time years ago and said that someone she loved had died. And my response at that time was, oh, well, just be present. And it was such a bypassing thing, you know, and a lot of spirituality can involve some spiritual bypassing. And when we get these spiritual concepts, we can almost start denying our human side and things. And that leads me to my next question. When I first met you, I was in the process of getting out of a spiritual community that, in my opinion, had turned into a cult. And I think you've worked with quite a few people from that, and you might share the same opinion with all that you've heard. I don't know. But what I've observed is a lot of people get into spirituality to try and find things like peace and love and joy and oneness and stuff, when actually what they really could do with is some trauma healing. What's your observations with this and the relationship between spirituality and trauma healing?
Well, I don't really have much experience or connection with people in spiritual communities. I think you guys were the first that I'd met, and I was rather shocked to hear what was involved there. I had no idea. And I think that so many people are disconnected from themselves and they're searching for a connection. And I think it can be quite a seductive offer to be told that, you know, if you come and join our spiritual community, you will be connected not only to all these people, but you'll be connected to God. But you've got to follow these rules and regulations in order to have that. You see, I think that's what happens. And I think people get trapped because so many people are traumatized. And the biggest trauma that I see, the largest volume of trauma that I see is childhood trauma. And it comes in two forms. The one is neglect, where the child has not had that deep connection from either parent. They are neglected. So it's emotional neglect. And the other one is abandonment, where the parent is there but not there, or actually abandoned, died or left. And that deep trauma, that emotional empty hole inside a child grows to be this searching, you know, teenager or 20-year-old that is looking for this kind of connection. And I think that these spiritual communities use and abuse those sometimes to some degree. That's what I'm imagining. It's certainly what I experienced through your experiences that you shared with me. So that could be part of the problem. And then there are probably other communities that do it just fine, and they do get a real connection. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an authority on this.
What I've seen is that when it comes to the causes of things, there appears to be both mind causes and kind of soul causes almost. You know, there's like mind answers and spiritual answers. And I love what you described earlier about the process of going from the spiritual through the levels to the physical level. Remember you shared that earlier in this conversation? That seems very relevant to what we're talking about right now. But I would urge everyone to maybe not create such a barrier between these two methodologies. They can coexist very well. And sometimes when people get into spirituality, they start going, well, I'm beyond therapy. I shouldn't have to deal with that, or whatever. And I'm trying to want to put out there a bit more of a unified approach where the stigma is taken away, whatever path you're on. Anyway, I'm glad I experience you as an incredibly spiritual person. It's funny that you say that you don't seem to have much experience in spiritual communities, I guess. But what's spirituality to you?
Well, I think it's a little bit the opposite of what's happening in in the spiritual group you're in. For me, spirituality is the first task is becoming connected deeply to myself at a heart level, in the most compassionate and self-accepting way that I can be. And it's only from that place that I can then begin to reach out and connect deeply in a spiritual, respectful, sacred way with other human beings, with nature, with the planet, and with beings in other planes, which I now do connect with. I actually channel when I work. And that's only come in recent years. So, but it had to start here. It had to start with me. Because previously, when I was very traumatized, I was disconnected. I was in some kind of fairy tale realm. That's not spirituality for me. Spirituality is being deeply centered and then able to radiate out from the core with everything that is.
A little observation I saw recently, which links with this, is remember the Hawkins states of consciousness? I was looking at that and I saw that at the bottom are all the trauma response emotions. You've got shame, anger, grief, things like that. And then how is someone supposed to kind of rise up to these higher levels of consciousness if, like you say, they are disconnected or they are still physically traumatized and they're kind of stuck in these lower levels? It's almost like if you just clear that out, it's just natural to rise up through these states of consciousness. What's your take on that?
Well, absolutely. I was sharing that diagram with somebody only yesterday, and I said that I call the zone under 200 the trauma zone. Right. And that until you have healed trauma, you cannot rise to a level of consciousness above 200 where you feel happy and productive. And if you keep working on consciousness, if you keep improving your level of consciousness inside yourself, you'll go higher and higher and higher in consciousness. And that's the path of spirituality. It's the raising consciousness.
So right there, you've got the acid test for anybody wanting to join any potential spiritual community. Ask the leaders, ask the teachers or whatever, what have you done to heal your trauma? And if they don't have an answer to that, or they have some sort of gaslighting, but spiritual bypassing answer, you're probably pretty certain that although they might talk the talk, they might still be stuck in the trauma zone, like you're talking about, the under 200. So there's a really good example. I look at people that I could apply that to, and I know they haven't healed it. So they're talking the talk about the higher levels of consciousness, but the nervous system doesn't lie, does it?
Yes.
Let me move on to the final part of what I want to talk about tonight. Manifestation. One of the things I love about Q.E.C is you can use it for manifestation. And it's not as simple as just popping in a few goals or affirmation, things that you might want into there. Would you mind, just so people have an understanding of how they could apply Q.E.C to manifesting? Could you kind of share the kind of stages almost of manifestation using Q.E.C?
Well, manifesting is about things in the future. It's about, it could be anything. It could be from having success in the job interview tomorrow to finding my new relationship or the next house I want to move to. So basically, it's the same technique of installing the goal at the subconscious level, and obviously the sentences have to be structured in the present tense, because if we were to put them in the future tense, it would never arrive, because our body at the subconscious level is present tense. So you would use the concept of, again, a miracle or a magic wand. The reason why I always offer that to my clients is because I want them to access their higher neocortex, not just think of the next best thing, but think of the ultimate thing that they could have. So I say, if you had a miracle, what would you like your next partner to be like? Let's see what all his features would be. What does he look like? What is he like as a human being? And then we start structuring sentences. And before we actually get to those positive attributes, I would first of all want to check, do you have any resistance or any blocks around having a new relationship? Because one of the things about manifestation is that we will block it if we have anything in our energy field that's fear or a no. So if we've had a bad relationship last time around, it could be that we don't trust men, with black hair. You know what I'm saying? Just saying silly now. So I would want to release whatever that block is. I release my fear with men of black hair, and then we can move on to all the positive things. And the thing that has really surprised me in the manifestation exercises is how amazingly powerful it is and how quickly it comes. I actually warn people that you got to be ready when you do it, because it's sometimes the next day. It's that quick. And if you don't have any resistance or any blocks and you've cleared them all, it really comes. I mean, it really comes. It's amazing. We've had every house that way.
What was that?
Every house we've manifested that way.
That's really awesome. I think it's really important. It's beautiful what you've shared, and it's just. I just wanted to make sure people are aware of that resistance bit, the blocks, the emotions, the beliefs, the past experiences. Again, it all starts with clearing out the way, clearing out the trauma or whatever, and then it's so much easier just to bring in what they want. And one of the little things that I've seen with the work that you've done is that I've seen a lot of people focusing on manifestation, but part of healing trauma, I've observed, is the need to rebuild needs and boundaries. Like it's almost like if you think needs are like the basics, the foundation, then wants it, after that. And I've noticed that when people haven't even mastered the needs level in the game of manifestation, it's harder for them to move on to the wants and desires and things like that. So I don't know. I just wanted to share that with you because it's something I've observed through the work that you've taught me, is this needs and boundaries. So important.
Yeah, and look, I don't ever engage with doing manifestation in the early days. I always tell clients we leave that to the end, because it's important to clear everything out the way first. It's so important to clear trauma, and clear the whole energy field and strengthen that tree trunk. I mean, you're in such a different place by having done that. And then the world's your oyster after that. You've got a strong tree trunk, everything's ready to go, and then you can manifest whatever you want, the job or the new partner or whatever.
Let me end with how we usually end our webinars. Do you want to just close by saying goodbye and how you found this interview, and anything else you want to share to close off?
Well, that'll be a lot easier than trying to think what message that I have, because I'd have to think about a message. Look, I thoroughly enjoyed. I always love interviews with you, Sandy, so you can have me on anytime. It's great talking to you. It's like we've been sitting over the table having a cup of coffee. It's fabulous. And one of these days I'll really do it with you. I'll come to Mexico.
I cannot wait to sit across and have that cup of coffee with you. Thank you so much. What we're going to do is I'm going to bring this part of the interview to a close, and if you're going to stay online just a little bit longer in case someone in the room in my club has a direct question for you, because it's a real benefit for them to be able to talk to you personally. But first of all, thank you very much for joining me for this interview with Dr Melanie Salmon, creator of Q.E.C. Go to qecliving.com for more information about Melanie. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and don't forget to experience Q.E.C with me. Then check out my website minddetox.com to book some one-on-one sessions with me.